Shall we take a look at various Hispanic Christmas traditions? So we know that there are various Christmas traditions in various cultures, and in our Hispanic culture here in Texas, we have certain traditions that are not found in other places in the United States. Tomorrow, when I fly to Ohio for 2 days to visit my parents, if I were to ask them about these traditions, they probably would not know what I'm talking about. They're traditions that are part of the Hispanic culture in Mexico and Latin America, and also here in Texas, since this was once part of Mexico. What are some of those traditions that we have around the Christmas season? Today we're going to talk about Posadas, Piñatas, Pastorelas, and the Aguinaldo. Have we heard of that?
I heard that. What is that?
So let's start with the Posadas. What are Posadas? Posadas are celebrated beginning on December the 16th through December the 24th. Such that on those 9 days, what we have is a reenactment of Jesus and Mary's looking for shelter in Bethlehem. Which story did that come from? Matthew or Luke? The whole looking for a place to stay? That's the Gospel of Luke, right? How it was that there was a census, they had to go to Bethlehem, no place to stay. They finally found a place in an inn where Jesus was born in a manger. So the Posadas are based on the Gospel of Luke. What do we do in the Posada? What we do is we reenact they're looking for shelter or lodging. What does the word Posada mean? It's a Spanish word meaning lodging, a place to stay. So Mary and Joseph are looking for a posada, a place to stay. And so we reenact it by knocking on one door. Usually we do this around the neighborhood, right? We knock on one person's door. There's a group inside the house singing and a group outside the house singing. They sing back and forth until in the end, do they decide to open their door to Joseph and Mary and let them in? No. They say, go on from here. We don't know who you are. You're not staying here in our home. What a great tradition, because it reminds us of how it is that we too can open our hearts to other people, or how it is that sometimes we close our hearts to other people, right? So the Posada, in the reenactment, they knock on the first door. Do they let them in? No. They go to another door, they knock again, and the singing continues. Do the people inside let them in? No. Until the very end of the Posada. The Posada ends with the celebration. When finally they knock on a door, you can imagine Joseph and Mary in that story according to Luke, not finding a place to stay, where finally in the end, someone opens the door and gives them a place to stay. And then the celebration begins with the Posada. So the celebration begins at the conclusion of the Posada. And so that's the story of the Posada. It's a reenactment of Joseph and Mary's search for lodging in Bethlehem until finally someone opens their heart and opens their door to let them in. What a great symbol, right? Because opening doors or closing doors, have any of us seen the movie Frozen? In the movie Frozen, it's a Disney movie where the big symbol is a closed door, where Elsa will not let her younger sister Anna into her bedroom. The symbol of a closed door is also the symbol of a closed heart. The symbol of an open door, the symbol of an open heart. How interesting. Are the doors of your hearts open to others, or do you close the doors of your heart, keeping others out? The next tradition is that of Piñatas. So Posadas are celebrated every December the 16th through the 24th. Have we heard of Piñatas before? So the question is, where do Piñatas come from? We believe that Piñatas were Italian in origin. That's what we used to believe. That the Italian word Piñata means an earthenware cooking pot. Follow me now. So instead of using paper mache, what did they use in Italy? They used an earthenware clay cooking pot. So they put the treats inside a clay pot, and then they would have people hit it with a stick until the treats came out, until it was broken. That was the Italian tradition. But scholars now suggest that actually the tradition of the piñata is even more ancient than Italy and goes back to China. What was happening in China, they would put seeds in a container, and they would beat that container of seeds with different colored sticks, Think about how it ties to our own traditions today. Until the seeds would spill out, and then they would take the remains of the container, they would burn it, and they would keep the ashes as a symbol of good luck. So however this tradition arose, the Chinese had a similar ritual, the Italians used the clay pot, the Spanish in the 14th century really popularized the piñata, which is why in the 16th century, when we came to the New World, what did we do? We brought our traditions with us. And it was one of the ways in which the early friars helped to evangelize the New World. They used Posadas, the reenactment of Mary and Joseph's search for lodging, but they also used Piñatas. Why Piñatas? Is there any relationship between Piñatas and our faith? Can you think of any relationship between a piñata, all those piñatas, torsadistas or chapas? Can you think of any relationship between piñatas and our Catholic faith? Question. How many horns or points are on a traditional piñata? The traditional piñata has 7 horns. What do those 7 horns symbolize? Those 7 horns symbolize the 7 deadly sins, or the 7 capital sins. Think about it now. What do we do with the piñata? We beat that piñata, which has 7 horns representing the 7 deadly sins. When we beat back the 7 deadly capital sins in our lives, what happens? Grace pours out, so that the treats inside the piñata represent grace pouring out. The whole blindfolding of the person. Y'all are looking at me like this is the first time you're hearing this. We've had piñatas all these years and we had no idea. Why do we blindfold people? Blindfolding is a symbol of faith, right? We walk by faith and not by sight, right? We walk by faith. And so how it is that we're sort of like those blind people who are blindfolded with the piñata. We walk by faith. And we beat back the sins in our lives, the 7 capital sins, until the grace of God pours out. Do we remember what some of those capital sins are? So the capital sins, we've actually had lists of various deadly sins or capital sins since the 4th century. About the 14th century, we started popularizing a list of 7. We know that as a church, 7 is a lucky number, right? How many sacraments do we have in the church? 7. How many sins are we going to come up with? A list of 7. Have we heard of some of these capital or deadly sins? The sin of wrath, which means what in plain English? Anger, getting angry. Getting angry is one of those things that we should be beating back in our lives so we're not getting angry as much. What about greed? Greed is a capital sin. Wanting lots of stuff. The sin of gluttony. What is gluttony? Gluttony is wanting not a lot of stuff, but a lot of food. Gluttony is eating and eating and eating. Said the ancient church, this is a capital sin. We should be denying our bodies, said the ancient church. Right? The whole body-spirit dualism. What about the sin of sloth? Have you heard of sloth before? I've heard of the animal. What is the animal? The sloth is the animal that hangs upside down and moves 1 inch per hour. Looks like an upside down bear, right? Moves 1 inch per hour. The sloth that is very slow moving. What is the sin of sloth? Laziness. Ooh. We need to beat back the laziness in our lives so the grace of God can pour forth. Look at us like, oh man, this is quite a list of sins to be working on. What about the sin of pride? Another capital sin is pride. And then finally, the last 2 are lust, lusting after others, and also envy, being envious of others and the things that they have. So the ancient church said, these are the things in life we should avoid. The tradition of the piñata, then, is how it is that we should beat back those sins so that the grace of God can spill forth into our life. Today, on this 4th Sunday of Advent, we celebrate our rite of reconciliation after Mass. That's essentially what we're doing. We're asking for God's grace, God's forgiveness, so we can continue beating back those sins in our life. The last 2 Christmas traditions are the Pastorela. Pastorelas date to 14th century France. So French troubadours had pastorelas. What is a pastorella today? It's usually a Christmas story of how the devil and various demons tried to keep the shepherds from getting to the manger scene. What gospel would that be? Would that be the Gospel of Matthew or the Gospel of Luke? The shepherds' Gospel of Luke, those who are poor and marginalized. And so the pastorella is based on that Gospel of Luke, where the devil tries to keep the shepherds from getting to the manger scene. And finally, the last Christmas tradition in the Hispanic culture is called the Aguinaldo. Have you heard of the Aguinaldo before? Anyone here heard of the Aguinaldo? What is an Aguinaldo? It's actually, by law in Mexico, which is why it's popular south of the border, employers have to give a Christmas bonus to their employees by law. And that bonus has to be at least 2 weeks of wages, and it has to be paid by December the 20th. Why would a government pass a law about Christmas bonuses? Because by giving bonuses, that helps to stimulate the economy. And so the Mexican government has this tradition, which now has become a Hispanic tradition in many places, of the Aguinaldo, giving people a Christmas bonus that equals at least 2 weeks' wages, maybe a month of wages in some places, as a Christmas bonus.